Hi, everybody. This is Norman Bolter, and this video, in certain ways, will be quite different than some of the other ones, but in another way, you'll recognize the same thing, the same theme, which is music as a living thing. But this video is called From That Little Guy After Heart Surgery. So let's give you a little bit of the storyline. You might find it interesting at the human level. My wife and I were invited to give some master classes, and then I was going to give a solo recital, and did, at the Governor's School for the Arts and Humanities in Greenville, South Carolina. Dr. David Hamilton, who heads, I think, a lot of the brass department and conducts the wind ensemble and probably the orchestra there, invited me to come down, us to come down. And we arrived on April 6th, and the concert and the master classes were on April 7th, Thursday, April 7th. When I woke up in the morning of April 7th, I took a breath. Remember, I was laying in bed, and I took a breath, and I felt a very subtle and not so subtle, kind of squeeze in my lungs, lower part of my lungs. I thought, wow, this is odd. I take a breath, and then all of a sudden the squeeze would happen. It's kind of like a squeeze. It almost felt like the breathing was coming up against some kind of a heavy-duty sponge that just would not budge, would not have any more elasticity. So I could take a breath to a point, and then it would stop. That didn't totally worry me. I just thought, well, I'm probably going to get some monster cold after this whole thing is over. That's what I thought. But I wasn't really worried about playing because of having some asthma in the past. I've trained myself to actually be able to take very small breaths and build a certain efficiency on the embouchure, and it was fine, actually. So I went to the rehearsal with the pianist that morning at 10 o'clock, and I could still feel that little thing in there, but it was fine. I gave a master class at 1:30 in the afternoon. It was very well. I did some things. I thought, wow, this is really coming out easy. Did this big list from low B flat to high F, lip trill down the high F, went to the double B flat and said, feels really easy today. Wow. And the class was really good. The kids are excellent. Had a really nice time working with them. They were open. They were listening, responsive, and that's always a joy. Then my wife gave a phenomenal master class, basically on performance anxiety, but the way she approached it was incredible. Really looking at the fact that, you know, if someone's really sensitive and gets nervous, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe they're actually more sensitive than most people. She was calling that a superpower. And so it was great. It was really a way to engage everyone in looking at the territory in a way that doesn't put the blame just on the individual person, but looked at it in the much broader context of why our environment would support such behavior. Anyway, maybe I'll have her, or she'll do a whole thing on that video herself, which would be great. But getting back to the situation of our whole, well, this is all a part of the story. Because then after that, after her master class was probably 5 o'clock or later, and was only a couple hours till the recital. So we had to drive back to the school or drive back to where we were staying, eat a little bit, maybe rest. I'd always warm up and said to come back and warm up. And still felt the little thing in the lungs. But like I said, it didn't bother me. Nothing else felt weird. Everything else felt fine. Played the recital, had 7 world premieres on it. It was really fun. I did things that I haven't done before in a recital, so that was great. Kids were there was a long line of them wanting to speak with me afterwards, and some really caught some of the deeper aspects, way beyond just watching someone play. They got other parts of the transmission, which I was very impressed with and very thankful for, that they could pick that up and it came across. So we went back to where we were staying, and within a half hour or so, I started not to feel so well. It was almost like a bad flu was subtly coming over me. I started to get shaky and all this stuff and sweaty, and basically just slept in a chair the whole night long. And the next day, my wife said to me, "Hey, maybe we should see a doctor." And I said, "I can't even fathom someone touching me right now. I got to just stay put in this chair, and maybe I'll get better." And, she's extremely knowledgeable with a lot of different things, so she suggested certain things. And within the course of the day, I started to feel better by that much. But hey, that much was a little better. So stayed in the place that night, still in the chair, all crumpled up, shaking. Got up in the morning, it felt that much better. And so she said, "We're going right now to some, urgent care center." I said, "Fine, let's go." Because I could actually fathom, moving. So we got to this place called Emergency MD in Greenville. And I'll tell you, if you need to go anywhere, if you're sick, that's a great place to go. These people that met me there, they were like angels. The way they treated you was so soft. And their tempo to deal with you was so comforting. And they were there to be of service to your life. Now you think, well, that's the way it should be. Yes, it's not always that way. But they were like that, and I'll never forget them. Well, after certain blood work was taken and some chest x-rays, the doctor came in and said, "Well, a couple of things. First, some bad news. And you have a whopping case of pneumonia." I said, "Okay. Now for the worst news. There's something wrong with your heart." We thought it was a heart attack, but it was not. There was something called troponin, which the heart gives off, and those levels were very high. So they knew the heart was under stress and was having difficulty dealing with the pneumonia. And so they sent me to this hospital in Greenville, which is known for very good cardiac treatment. And it's called St. Francis Hospital. And they were terrific in there as well. Absolutely terrific. So I was checked in with having pneumonia, but also they knew they had to do other tests on my heart. So they did one called, like an angioplasty. They wanted to go up there and look at what's going on. If there's blockages, then they wanted to try to take care of it with stents. But that wasn't going to cut it. It was more complicated than that. I had several blockages, multi-blockages, and 3 arteries. So the doctor came in and said, "Look, after your pneumonia is cleared up, you're going to need bypass surgery." So that was a big double whammy. But I felt total trust, which is very curious. Absolute total trust, and was totally going with the flow. And my views on life and my connections were very alive in me. And I was very aware of the circumstance. Very difficult surgery. They can't guarantee anything, even though it's become pretty standard. Still, it's quite complex what went on. So it took 10 days for the pneumonia to clear up. Right now I was starting to feel pretty good. Then I realized in a couple days I had to have this big bypass surgery. So I had that on April 19th, 10 days after I checked into the hospital. And I remember the prep, and they let my wife be in there for the prep. Actually, Dr. Vera Carroll was with me in the hospital the whole time. She slept in this very uncomfortable chair. You know, it leaned back and everything, but, you know, it wasn't that comfortable, and she was there the whole time. What can you say? It's extraordinary. So she was with me during the prep, and then there's the point. I was all ready to go in, and I remember going in, and I remember seeing, you know, different shaped lights and things, and the next thing I remember was opening my eyes and seeing my wife right in front of me. It's this incredible light blue background, which she said it wasn't, but that's what I saw. And she was there smiling, and I thought I was smiling back, but she said, no, you weren't. Your eyes were barely open. You had a giant tube stuck down your throat. So I'm telling people this because it's all music. Music is energy. Music is vibration. Music is very, very specific vibration according to a certain circumstance. I had music going through me of a certain chant-like nature, and sometimes Bach, and sometimes a chorale section, the brass chorale from the piece I wrote called Passions of Survival. And I also had some of the first and second movements of Bruckner 7 going through me at certain times. All things and connections that I've made with certain pieces that create certain states in myself. And that was really a fantastic thing. Plus what I think about life. So all these factors made the experience really extraordinary. The surgeon was absolutely fantastic, Dr. Hugh Dennis. He was terrific, very clear, concerned, concise, and everything went great. Then I started to come around. I remember being in the intensive care unit. Some of that wasn't too much fun, which I will not go into detail with, okay? But there's a person in there, Johnny Lee, she was fantastic. And then went to a step-down unit, you know, and gradually, before you know it, in a couple days, you know, the physical therapy sessions start. At least first it's a few steps, then it's a few more, and then pretty soon you're doing a lot. Walking around and stuff might not be that easy, but you're doing it. And you can see that how important it is that when something happens, let's even put this into your playing. Something happens, you hurt your chops. Sometimes totally laying off, like a lot of people do, isn't always the best thing. There are different circumstances, but look at after this big surgery, within 2.5 days, maybe 3, I don't even know if it was 3, they had me walk. So there was some knowledge in there. Sometimes, you know, I was wondering, hey, are these people rushing things a little too much? But They were very open to saying, look, I need to stop now. But they wanted to just make sure that there was a gradual expansion and extension of what I could do. So it's all about rhythms, it's all about timings, it's all about attitude, so many things about music, because it is music. So things take time. But during that time, it doesn't have to be idle time. You can be doing things. As a matter of fact, I wrote quite a bit of music in the hospital. Even drew some pictures. I used to love to draw. Wrote down some notes. A couple of thoughts about some things. Had a lot of time to think and reflect and contemplate, which I do anyway. But this gave me an extended period. My wife was bringing me food, even though the hospital staff did everything they could, because they know my diet's extremely strict, much stricter than one you get in a hospital. But again, my wife was bringing in different foods from Whole Foods and staying up and making them and doing all sorts of incredible things. Because you think about it, I was there for 5 weeks. Because after the hospital let me out on April 26th, I went to a rehab center for a week. And then after that, we stayed in an Airbnb for another week. Because the surgeon said, look, I don't want you flying in an airplane unless it's been minimum 3 weeks after the surgery. Because they're concerned about a lot of different things like blood clots forming and all that. So, what a process. I mean, think about it. My wife had to do things from South Carolina. Call people on the phone in Boston. The pet sitters, Stephanie and Janine, were phenomenal because we have 2 pets, a parrot and a rabbit. So they had to be taken care of. All this, I don't even want to tell you how many things had to be taken care of. People were mailing, our mail to us. Some of our neighbors, Peggy and Don, from West Roxbury to Massachusetts to Greenville, South Carolina. So we could, see bills and see other things that would come in. It's a huge amount. My wife did an extraordinary job doing that. But that's tough. And it has its own strain, believe me. So now it's been over a week since I've been back in Boston. And I was going to show you this thing, which is a incentives barometer. They give it to you especially when you have pneumonia because it has some resistance, and it helps you if you blow into this and keep getting this up to get phlegm up. But also after heart surgery, they don't want you to get pneumonia, and they want you to get the fluids up that have accumulated. So this thing was fantastic. I wanted to play it for you, but it broke right before the making of this video. So you can imagine if I was playing saxophone then. That looked more like bassoon, didn't it? But that's the instrument I've been playing for a while. It's been 6 weeks since I've laid off trombone. Probably another month and a half before I can play. I've never taken off that amount of time before. So I'm going to tell you, when I play again, I'm going to play my first note on a video. And I think that would be a great video series called Recovery. Because this might happen to many people. They have to lay off. Maybe to some people it's not a big deal. Some people said they lay off for, a month, 2 months, 3 months, and pick it up, and in a couple days it's fine. Hey, terrific. I'm not sure that's going to be my case, but I don't know. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to make that video series, the Recovery. So this This video is longer than I wanted to make, but I wanted to tell people the story and my thanks for the pneumonia. Who's ever thankful for pneumonia? But I am, because it got me to the hospital. Because I didn't have big, incredible symptoms. I had some when I think back, but not to the degree where you can't function at all. So there you go. Life is stranger than fiction, and is a great writing, a great scriptural writing called the Bhagavad Gita, says in verse 17, chapter 4, it ends with, unfathomable is the course of action. So I've decided, with great advice from very wise people in writings, to accept everything in life that comes as a gift. That's not always easy to do. But it's happening for you to develop yourself even more and to put your priorities in alignment of what's really important. And I'm actually extraordinarily thankful. I really am. I was prepared if it went a different way. But here I am talking to you. So I hope some of you can get something from this. And tune in maybe a month and a half or so for the recovery series. Okay? Be well.